Here's to hoping this stays mostly in place while I try to do this. Alrighty, let's see here. We are recording, right? Yes, we are. And Remy, the secretary, only the inspector warned by experience, was careful not to laugh, while Madame Gurgi ventured to adopt an attitude that was positively threatening. Instead of laughing, she cried indignantly, You'd do better to do as Polygamy did, who found out for himself. Found out about what? Asked Moncharming, who had never been so much amused in his life. About the ghost, of course. Look here. She suddenly calmed herself, feeling that this was a solemn moment in her life. Look here, she repeated. They were playing Le Jouve, and Polygamy thought he would watch the performance from the ghost's box. Well, then Leopold cries, Let us fly! You know. And Eliza stops them and says, Whither go ye? Well, and Polygamy. I was watching him from the back of the next box, which was empty. And Polygamy got up and walked out stiffly, like a statue. And before I had time to ask him, Whither go ye? Like Eliza, he was down the staircase without breaking his leg. Still, that doesn't let us know how the opera ghost came to ask you for a footstool, insisted Anne Moncharming. Well, from that evening, no one tried to take the ghost's private box from him. The manager gave orders that he was to have it at each performance, and whenever he came, he asked me for a footstool. Tut-tut, a ghost asking for a footstool. Then this ghost of yours is a woman? No, the ghost is a man. How do you know? He has a man's voice. Oh, such a lovely man's voice. This is what happens when he comes to the opera. It's usually in the middle of the first act. He gives 3 little taps on the door of box 5. Water. Food for the soul. Just kidding, that's the Bible. Alrighty, let's see here. Where did we leave off? When I knew there was no one in the box, you can think how puzzled I was. I opened the door, listened, looked, nobody. Then I heard a voice say, Madame Jules. My poor husband's name was Jules. A footstool, please. Saving your presence, gentlemen, it made me feel overish like. But the voice went on. Don't be frightened, Madame Jules. I'm the opera ghost. And the voice was so soft and kind that I hardly felt frightened. The voice was sitting in the corner chair, on the right, in the front row. Was there anyone in the box on the right of box 5? Asked Moncharmin. No, box 7 and box 3, the one on the left, were both empty. The curtain had just gone up. And what did you do? Well, I brought the footstool, of course. It wasn't for himself he wanted it, but for his lady. But I never saw her. Never heard her nor saw her. What? So now the ghost is married? The eyes of the two managers traveled from Madame Gurgey to the inspector, who was standing behind the box keeper, was waving his arms to attract their attention. He tapped his forehead with a distressful forefinger to convey his opinion that the widow Jules Gurley was most certainly mad. A piece of pantomime which confirmed M. Richard in his determination to get rid of an inspector who kept a lunatic in his service. Meanwhile, the worthy lady went on about her ghost, now painting his generosity. At the end of the performance, he always gives to me 2 francs, sometimes 5, sometimes even 10. When he has been many days without coming, only since people have begun to annoy him, he gives me nothing at all. Excuse me, my good woman, said Moncharmin, while Madame Gurley tossed the feathers in her dingy hat as her persistent familiarity. Excuse me, how does the ghost manage to give you 2 francs? Why, he leaves them on the little shelf in the box, of course. I find them with the program, which I always give him. Some evenings I find flowers in the box, a rose that must have dropped from his lady's bodice. For he brings a lady with him sometimes. One day, they left a fan behind them. Oh, the ghost left a fan, did he? And what did you do with it? Well, I brought it back to the box the next night. Here the inspector's voice was raised. You've broken the rules. I shall have to fine you, Madame Gurley. Hold your tongue, fool, muttered M. Fergan Richard. Now I see why the real Phantom doesn't have a nose piece on his. Well, he has like half of one, I think. I'd have to look at a picture. I don't know. Anyway. You brought back the fan, and then? Well, then they took it away with them, sir. It was not there at the end of the performance, and in its place they left me a box of English sweets, which I'm very fond of. That's one of the ghost's pretty thoughts. That will do, Madame Gurgey. You can go. When Madame Gurgey had bowed herself out, with the dignity that never deserted her, the manager told the inspector that they had decided to dispense with the old madwoman's services, and when he had gone in his turn, they instructed the acting manager to make up the inspector's accounts. Left alone, the managers told each other of the idea which they both had in mind, which was that they should look into the little matter of Box 5 themselves. Chapter 5. The Enchanted Violin. Christine Daae, owing to intrigues to which I will return later, did not immediately continue her triumph at the opera. After the famous gala night, she sang once at the Duchess de Zurch's, but this was the last occasion on which she was heard in private. She refused without possible excuse to appear at a charity concert to which she had promised her assistance. She acted without as though she were no longer the mistress of her own destiny, and as though she feared a fresh triumph. She knew that the Comte de Chagny, to please his brother, had done his best on her behalf with M. Richard, and she wrote to thank him, and also to ask him to cease speaking in her favor. Her reason for this curious attitude was never known. Some pretended that it was due to overweening pride. Others spoke of her heavenly modesty, but people on stage are not so modest as all that. And I think that I shall not be far from the truth if I ascribe her action simply to fear. Yes, I believe that Christine Daae was frightened by what had happened to her. I have a letter from Christine's. It forms a part of the Persians collection relating to this period, which suggests a feeling of absolute dismay. I don't know myself when I sing, writes the poor child. She showed herself nowhere, and the Vicomte de Chagny tried in vain to meet her. He wrote to her asking to call upon her, but despaired of receiving a reply when one morning she sent him the following note. Monsieur, I have not forgotten the little boy who went into the sea to rescue my scarf. I feel that I must write to you today, when I am going to Paros in fulfillment of a sacred duty. Tomorrow is the anniversary of the death of my poor father, whom you knew, and who was very fond of you. He is buried there with his violin in the graveyard of the little church at the bottom of the slope where we used to play as children, beside the road where, when we were a little bigger, we said goodbye for the last time. The Vicomte de Chagny hurriedly consulted a railway guide, dressed as quickly as he could, wrote a few lines for his valet to take to his brother, and jumped into a cab which brought him to the Gare Montparnasse, just in time to miss the morning train. He spent a dismal day in town, and did not recover his spirits until the evening, when he was seated in his compartment in the Brittany Express. He read Christine's note over and over again, smelling its perfume, recalling the sweet pictures of his childhood, and spent the rest of that tendish night journey in a feverish dreams that begun and ended with Christine Daae. Day was breaking when he alighted at Lannon. He hurried to the diligence for Perros-Guirec. He was the only passenger. He questioned the driver and learned that on that evening of the previous day, a young lady who looked like a Parisian had gone to Paros and put up at the inn known as the Setting Sun. The nearer he drew to her, the more fondly he remembered the story of the little Swedish singer. Most of the details were still unknown to the public. There was once a little market town, not far up from Uppsala. A peasant who lived there was with his family digging the earth during the week and singing in the choir on Sundays. All right, there we go. This peasant had a little daughter to whom he taught the musical alphabet before she knew how to read. Daae's father was a great musician, perhaps without knowing it, not a fiddler throughout the length and breadth of Scandinavia played as he did. That's better. His reputation was widespread, and he was always invited to set the couples dancing at weddings and other festivals. His wife died when Christine was entering upon her 6th year. When the father, who cared only for his daughter and his music, sold his patch of ground and went to Uppsala in search of fame and fortune, he found nothing but poverty. He returned to the country, wandering from fair to fair, strumming his Scandinavian melodies, while his child, who never left his side, listened to him in ecstasy, or sang to his playing. One day, Limby Fair, Professor Valerius heard them and took them to Gothenburg. He maintained that the father was the first violinist in the world, and that the daughter had the making of a great artist. Her education and instruction were provided for. She made rapid progress and charmed everybody with her prettiness, her grace of manner, and her genuine eagerness to please. When Varagus and his wife went to settle in France, they took Daae and Christine with them. Mama! Varius treated Christine as her daughter. As for Daae, he began to pine away with homesickness. He never went out of doors in Paris, but lived in a sort of dream which he kept up with his violin. For hours at a time he remained locked up in his bedroom with his daughter, fiddling and singing very, very softly. Sometimes Mama Valerius would come and listen behind the door, wipe away a tear, and go downstairs again on tiptoe, sighing for the Scandinavian skies. Daae seemed not to recover his strength until the summer, when the whole family went to stay at Perros-Guirec in the faraway corner of Brittany, where the sea was of the same color as in his own country. Often he would play his saddest tunes on the beach and pretend that the sea stopped its roar to listen to them. And then he induced Mama Valerius to indulge a queer whim of his. At the time of the pardons, or Burton pilgrimage, the village festival and dances, went off with his fiddle, as in the old days, and was allowed to take his daughter with him for a week. They gave the smallest hamlets music to last them for a year, and slept at night in a barn, refusing a bed at the end, lying close together on the straw. As when they were so poor in Sweden, at the same time, they were very neatly dressed, made no collection, refused the halfpence offered them, and the people around could not understand the conduct of this rustic fiddler who trampled the roads with that pretty child, who sang like an angel from heaven. They followed them from village to village. One day a little boy, who was out with his governess, had made her take a longer walk than he intended, for he could not tear himself from the little girl, whose pure sweet voice seemed to bind him to her. They came to the shore of an inlet which is still called Trestal, but which now I believe harbors a casino or something of the sort. At that time there was nothing but sky and sea and a stretch of golden beach. Only there was also high wind, which blew Christine's scarf out to sea. Christine gave a cry and put out her arms, but the scarf was already far on the waves. Then she heard a voice say, "It's all right. I'll go and fetch your scarf out of the sea." And she saw a little boy running fast, in spite of the outcries and the indignant protests of a worthy lady in black. The little boy ran into the sea, dressed as he was, and brought her back her scarf. The boy and scarf were both soaked through. The lady in the black made a great fuss, but Christine merrily and laughed merrily and kissed the little boy, who was none other than the victim Raoul de Changy, staying at Lennon with his aunt. During the season, they saw each other and played together almost every day. At the aunt's request, seconded by the Professor Valderes Dayard consented to give the young Viscount some violin lessons. In this way, Raoul learned to love the same airs that had charmed Christine's childhood. They also both had the same calm and dreamy little casts of mind. They delighted in stories, in old Breton legends. And their favorite spot was to go and ask for them at the cottage doors like beggars.
Ma'am,
Or,
kind gentleman, have you a little story to tell us, please?
and it seldom happened that they did not have one given them, or nearly every old Breton grandame has at least once in her life seen the Corrigans dance by the moonlight on the heather. But their great treat was in the twilight, in the great silence of the evening, after the sun had set in the sea, and I came and sat down by them on the roadside, and in a low voice, as though fearing lest he should frighten the ghosts whom he loved, told them the legends of the land of the north. And the moment he stopped, the children would ask for more. Then there was one story that began. A king sat in a little boat on one of whose deep still lakes that opened like a bright eye in the mist of Norwegian mountains. And another, little Lottie, thought of everything and nothing. Her hair was golden like the sun's rays. Her soul was as clear and blue as her eyes. She wheeled her mother was kind to her doll, took great care of her frock and her little red shoes, and her fiddle. But most of all, when she went to sleep, to hear the angel of music. While the old man told his story, Raoul looked at Christine's blue eyes and the golden hair, and Christine thought that Lottie was very lucky to hear the angel of music when she went to sleep. The angel of music played a part in all Daddy Daae's tales, and he maintained that every great musician, every great artist received a visit from the angel at least once in his lifetime. Sometimes the angel leans over their cradles, as happened to Lottie. And that is how there are little prodigies who play the fiddle at 6 better than men at 50, which you must admit is very wonderful sometimes. The angel comes much later because the children are naughty and won't learn their lessons or practice their scales. And sometimes he does not come at all because the children have a bad heart or a bad consciousness. No one ever sees the angel, but he is heard by those who are meant to hear him. He often comes when they least expect him, when they are sad or disheartened, when their ears suddenly perceive celestial harmonies,